Glenn Greenwald, we're going to give him a home run for this one. We're going to give Glenn a home run. Now, I don't agree with Glenn Greenwald on everything, but I do feel like he calls it how he sees it. You know, he's like, this is how I see it, and I'm just going to call it out. So Glenn Greenwald has been speaking about left politics in the United States and comparing it to left politics in other countries. And what he has come to, he has reached a conclusion that we actually do not have a real left in the United States. And he's going to call out certain people in particular and their policies to prove that point. Let's get into it. So Glenn Greenwald tweeted, "The problem is that there is little real left in the US. The Bernie/AOC left is all that exists. And it's a joke, totally lost and without any ideological anchor." Say it one more time for the people in the back. Can I make this bigger? Oh, there we go. Do you guys see what Glenn is saying here? Let's highlight this part. The problem is that there is little real left in the United States. The Bernie/AOC left is all that exists, and it's a joke, totally lost without any ideological anchor. I think he's right. I think he's right. Like, there's no, like, who's leading that movement? Because Bernie just leaves and comes back when he feels like, there's no one leading the movement. Bernie Sanders and AOC and the rest of the squad are just going along with corporate Democrats. They'll say a couple of progressive things here and there, but they rarely even talk about Medicare for all anymore. That started last year, by the way. Once Joe Biden got elected, all of a sudden they were pretty quiet on Medicare for all, but they were very vocal about it when Trump was in office. I wonder what changed. So I think he's spot on. He said it's a joke. I agree. Glenn, I don't agree with him on everything, but they're not doing anything. They're not doing anything progressive. Cori Bush is dancing over her new book. Their idea is just go back into the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders put out a video recently. We talked about it on RBN earlier tonight, talking about all the problems with the economic system we have in this country. He said the exact same things that he said when Trump was president. It's the same speech, different president, different party. What does that tell you about the two-party system? But then at the end of the speech, Bernie Sanders is telling you, you got to come out and vote in the midterms. We just need to get 2 more Democrat seats, as if what he said before all of that didn't matter. That's the problem with the left politicians that we have in this country. They went into the Democratic Party. So at the end of the day, when the Democratic Party tells them what to do, they're going to do what the party wants them to do. And I'm going to show you some voting records in just a second to prove my point. So there's no point of this. There's no point. They're just Democrats. That's just what they are. He goes on to say, they're just Democrats. He just said my point. They're just Democrats, never saying anything to offend mainstream liberal sensibilities or neoliberal pieties. You see this? They're just Democrats, right? This is all they are. And he's spot on here, never saying anything to offend mainstream liberal sensibilities. They don't. They don't call out Joe Biden the way they called out Donald Trump. They defend Joe Biden. They say just enough to make it seem like they're fighting for progressive issues and policies, but they're not actually doing anything. My parents always told me actions mean more. I'm going to show you their actions in just a second. Now, he goes on to say, this is an example he pointed to. The The squad calls for U.S. intervention in Ukraine. So remember this? This was February 26, 2022. And he's right to point this out. Again, receipts. He goes on to say here, Democrats are united completely in support of Biden's insanely wasteful and dangerous proxy war in Ukraine. So the Bernie/AOC wing, with a few exceptions, support the neocon, neoliberal consensus, or are too cowardly to dissent. Just pretend the war isn't happening at all. Yes. This is it. They support it. Now, remember, I told you about that pledge, that Justice Democrat pledge that they all signed. One of the items that was on that list was about war. They were not supposed to support it. They signed a pledge. So when people come to me and say, Sabrina, what if we could get the politicians to sign a document or a clause or a pledge? We've done that. This already happened. Once they win and they go into DC, we have no access to them. We can't just pick up the phone and say, you know, this is against the pledge, right? We can't do that. Justice Democrats, do they even have any access to them anymore? Does the Justice Democrats organization, have they contacted the members of the squad and told them that they have actually reneged the pledge that they signed? I'm sure they haven't. Let's go on, because Glenn has more to say. If you can find even one major difference between A, not just standard mainstream liberals, but what passes for the U.S. left, and B, the David Frums, Lindsey Grahams, John Brennans, and Bill Kristols of the world on foreign policy, tell me what it is. Where in D.C. are these aired? And that's because when it comes to foreign policy, both the Republicans and the Democratic Party, they're both pro-war. And the ones who stand out and vote against it is the same, like 3 people, right? The same people who stand up is usually like the one libertarian. It was Rand Paul, it was Ron Paul. Even Bernie voted for it. And he's a registered, independent? Who is the anti-war voice in Congress? Who is the anti-war voice in the Senate that's in the Democratic Party? Now, I mentioned Rand Paul. I mentioned Ron Paul. They were not a part of the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders claimed he was against war. You got to go back to the 70s to find those vids. But Bernie has voted for it. Who is it? Name one. Tell me. Let me know. We can talk about that tonight too. Let's go on. I mean, he really nailed it on this one. And worst of all, assuming we somehow get out of this without those use of nukes, is that the dirtiest and most toxic neocon premises have again been rejuvenated and mainstreamed. Diplomacy is weakness. Avoiding war makes you Chamberlain. Dissent from U.S. policy is treasonous. And then here is a piece here. Well, let me highlight it. This is Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, 1776. Great empires, the people who live in the capital and in the province remote from the scene of action, feel, many of them scarce any inconveniency from the war, but enjoy at their ease the amusement of reading in the newspapers the exploits of their own fleets and armies. To them, this amusement compensates the small difference between the taxes which they pay on account of the war and those which they had been accustomed to pay in time of peace. They are commonly dissatisfied with the return of peace, which puts an end to their amusement, and to 1,000 visionary hopes of conquest and national glory from a longer continuance of the war. Again, this document, that's Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. We read that when I was in school. So there was that piece. And then he goes on here. This could have been an article, Glenn. He really went at him with this one. Okie doke. All over the world, with the exception of the EU, which literally made it illegal to broadcast or platform Russian media, this dissent on U.S. war policies in Ukraine can be heard. Why in the U.S. is Fox the only mainstream venue that will air this? You know what, too? I have something else to say about Fox as well. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think Fox is biased as well. Don't get me wrong. But this is what he's referring to, this clip here. Here's the part of the segment I did on escalating U.S. involvement in the war in Ukraine, what Panetta and others call correctly the U.S. proxy war with Russia. For those fixated on labels, can someone tell me if this is a left or right-wing message? Let's hear what Glenn has to say.
American wars, Tucker, over the last several decades, they're incredibly similar. The way they convince Americans to support U.S. involvement in a war is they personalize a particular leader, get us to hate that leader. Oh, Saddam Hussein in Iraq is a terrible guy. Bashar al-Assad in Syria is this tyrannical force. Mullah Omar in Afghanistan is somebody we have to go and take out. Gaddafi in Libya, our emotions get up and we say, yeah, we can't, well, let's go take out these tyrants. And then, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars later and lives lost, polls always show that Americans come to realize that they regard those wars as a mistake. And the reason is they realized that no benefits came to the United States and American citizens by virtue of U.S. involvement in those wars. So let's apply that framework here. The consensus in Washington is that we are closer to the use of nuclear weapons than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis 60 years ago. There is a very real threat of a nuclear exchange or even a direct confrontation with Russia and the United States. And over what? Over who governs and rules not even Ukraine, but the Donbass, the eastern region in Ukraine, where a majority of people actually identify as ethnic Russians and want to be part of Russia. And yet there's almost no debate over whether we should be sending huge amounts of money there and risking the lives of American citizens through the possibility of a nuclear war, because everyone knows that the minute you step up and step out of line, there's a horde of people ready to call you unpatriotic or a traitor or an admirer of Vladimir Putin, as I know is being done with our very segment right this minute by all.
And that's the same thing I was saying about the war in Iraq. It was the same way. Like if you spoke out against that, you were criticized. Some people were canceled. I've talked about this before. The Dixie Chicks were canceled. Phil Donahue was canceled during that time as well. So that's why I said this is happening all over again. That's what it feels like.
All those Media Matter people and other people online. So it's a really repressive atmosphere, and it's squashing a debate that we absolutely have to have.
But we're losing track of reality. If a nation has nuclear weapons and you believe even theoretically they might use them, you have to treat that nation differently. You may not want to, it may be unfair, but that's why nations seek nuclear weapons, because you can't boss them around. If you ignore the possibility that your entire population could be killed, you are not fit for leadership because you're insane. And it feels like our leaders are right there. They're insane.
I think there's almost this sense that has been purposely cultivated to believe that the use of nuclear weapons really isn't a realistic possibility, even though we have had the use of nuclear weapons in the last century when the U.S. did it in Japan for World War II. And we came very close on at least 2 or 3 occasions. The U.S. and Russia did, these very same countries, to exchanging nuclear weapons and risking nuclear annihilation, including in the Cuban Missile Crisis, because the U.S. felt that the Russian presence over the border in Cuba was so threatening that we were going to have a nuclear war over it. That's how Russia sees what's happening in Ukraine right across their border. It is madness to assume that for Russia, what is an existential war, if they actually start losing it or NATO really starts escalating as we've been doing, that the chances of Vladimir Putin using nuclear weapons is zero. This is a dangerous delusion that I think a lot of people are operating under.
Now, I have a question for all of you that just listened to that segment. Why isn't MSNBC or CNN having this discussion with Glenn Greenwald? Why is it? And people criticize Glenn Greenwald for going on Fox News. They said he's on there all the time. He's on there too much. But why aren't the liberal media outlets per se, why aren't they inviting Glenn Greenwald on to those networks for the same discussion? Something to think about. Now, he has good points here in reference to what's left and what's considered left in the country. Like I said, like this is a long thread. Like he really went all in. And I don't agree again with Glenn Greenwald on everything, but I think he's 100% right about the squad, about this so-called left that we have in this country. And this is not to say that there aren't individuals that are leftists in this country, but this is to say that we don't have a left party, so to speak. We don't have a left movement. We thought we did. We thought we had a something. We thought we had a something. I think some of us thought we were bigger than we actually are. But that something's gone. So we have moved on, right? If you haven't moved on, come walk with me. Now, in reference to how they vote and what they do, I told you I've tracked their votes. So I know how they vote. And you can see this too. This is on 538. Let's take a look at the progressive members in Congress and how they vote. Now, let me, oh, it's big enough. All right. So what you want to pay attention to here is we are looking at the House. You can change this to Senate if you want to as well. We're looking at the House right now. And I have also adjusted this. I need to do it again. I'm going to adjust it so that we are only focused on Democratic Party because that's what we want to look at here, right? And what we want to pay attention to is how they vote with Joe Biden. So there's a part here that says Biden score, and it says how often the member votes in line with Biden's position. We are going to look at squad members, and then I'm going to show you an outlier. So first and foremost, this is in alpha order. Let's go through. Jamal Bowman. Jamal Bowman votes in line with Joe Biden, 94. Let me make this bigger. That's better. Jamal Bowman votes in line with Jamal Bowman 94.8% of the time. 94.8% of the time. Keep that in mind. You're going to see the differences here. Cori Bush votes along with Joe Biden 92.6% of the time. So you see what's happening here? Now, this is probably in reference to those policing bills, right? Let's go down. Next alpha is, I think Omar's next. Too many of you guys. Okay, here we go. Omar. M-O. Omar. Or actually, AOC comes before her. AOC votes in line with Joe Biden 93.7% of the time. Ilhan Omar votes along with Joe Biden 94.8% of the time. Let's take a look at Ayanna Pressley. Ayanna Pressley votes along with Joe Biden 93.8% of the time. Are you guys seeing a pattern here? Let's go on to Katie. You're not really one of them. Katie Porter's not really one of them. Let's go down to Rashida Tlaib. So Rashida Tlaib, where'd she go? Oh, there she is. Okay. That is not an alpha word. Torres does not come before. Anyway, Rashida Tlaib votes along with Joe Biden 93.6% of the time. Now, I want to show you an outlier. Let's find that little guy. I don't want to call him a little guy. That doesn't sound right. You see this guy right here? This is Kurt Schrader. You may not be familiar with him. Kurt Schrader votes along with Joe Biden 92.8% of the time. Why is that important for you to know? Kurt Schrader is not a progressive Democrat, was not a Justice Democrat. He's actually a corporate Democrat. He takes money from Blue Cross Blue Shield. I've already looked this up. Now, he's a representative out of Oregon. He's corporate. Why is Kurt Schrader voting along with Joe Biden less than the members of the squad? Anyone? 92.8%. That's Kurt. If you're watching and you live in Oregon and you know Kurt, this is something you might want to know. 92.8% of the time. Again, I just told you, who did we just look at? Rashida Tlaib. Rashida Tlaib was, oh, it jumped on me. Rashida Tlaib was 93.6. That was higher. Ilhan Omar. I'm not going to take you guys back through all of them, but I'm just trying to make a point. We skipped her too. Shoot. Where's Jamal Bowman? You know he has one of the highest ones. Jamal Bowman, 94.8%. So what? What? The only one that has the lowest is Cori Bush. And I bet you, like I said, I think that dealt with those policing bills. Ayanna Pressley. She's the other one. Let me scoot down. There she is. Ayanna Pressley, 93.8%. Again, also the policing bills. Okay? So for the people who say I don't show receipts. Now, we're going to go back up again, and we're going to go back to this Kurt guy, whoever he is. Like I said, I don't hear about him. Kurt Schrader, 92.8%. And then we'll go back to AOC. Sorry, it moves kind of fast. Whee! Okay, here we go. AOC, 93.7%. Ilhan Omar, 94.8%. Why is Kurt Schrader voting along with Biden less than the squad? So please tell me how they're fighting for us. There you have it. There it is. I'm going to go to some of the comments really quick. Brothwaite. Everyone listens to Mama Bear. You got right. Apparently not so much Kurt, though. Thank you for the super chat, Delthea. You can send 535 Democrats to DC in January. And in the next election, those 535 Democrats will be campaigning on what we could do if you send 2 more Dems to DC. Bingo. Bingo. Oz. Hey, Oz is here. Kurt lost his primary. Oz, I take it you know who Kurt is. Oz said Kurt lost his prom. There you go. See what happens when you do your own thing? You lose. They put people up against you. They put money up against you.